schedules of reinforcement. It's a power-packed day. Schedules of reinforcement. This is really talking about contingencies. Schedules of reinforcement are contingencies that tell you what's likely to happen to behavior depending on when reinforcement occurs or if reinforcement occurs. So now I've got intermittent or continuous. So I could give you a reinforcer every time you did a behavior. Every single time you did the target behavior, I said, good job, good job, good job, good job. Eventually, that would probably not be so reinforcing anymore. And as soon as I stop saying good job, it kind of implies that you're not doing such a good job anymore and you're liable to stop doing it. So continuous reinforcement is really good for learning things quickly, but it's not very good at maintaining behavior. Intermittent reinforcement, right? I don't want to say to the kid every time, good job with the shoes, good job with the shoes. Every now and then I'm like, man, look at how you did such a good job with your shoes. Every now and then being fairly random from the experience of the organism, and you'll find that that's the basis of gambling, right? Do you get paid off gambling every time you make a bet? You don't know when you'll get paid off, right? Which is what keeps it going. If you lost every single time, you would never do it, right? But if you win every now and then you never know. Is it the next one? Is it the next one? Is it the next one? So it keeps behavior going. Post-reinforcement pause says that after the reinforcer is delivered, the organism takes a little break from whatever it was doing that got the reinforcer, whatever that might have been. So those are just some terms to help you understand the actual schedules. The first of which is called fixed ratio. Fixed because it's fixed. It's consistent. It's usually predetermined. Ratio because we're talking about the numbers of behaviors that occur. So I'm going to show you all what's on the test. Now, bear with me. We got 4 minutes to the end of this class. I'm going to go through. You can highlight whatever you want to highlight that's white fonted. I'll show you all the highlighted material. If you need to leave, you will now know exactly what to study and what not to study. If you can stay with me, as soon as I finish doing that, I'm going to come right back here and go through the rest of the material, and you're welcome to stay with me through that process. I just want to respect your time and not leave you hanging on what you need to know. So you need to know schedules of reinforcement, including fixed ratio and variable ratio, which has a little asterisk beside it. Everybody got that? You need to know the other two schedules of reinforcement, which are fixed interval and variable interval. And concurrent schedules of reinforcement means that we're just on all kinds of schedules all the time. You're not on just one schedule of reinforcement. You're on one schedule of reinforcement for your relationships, on another one for your job, on another one for your work, on another one for your hobbies. So we're under a lot of different reinforcement schedules. That's just a graph showing it. Systematic desensitization, know that term for your test and what it means. We've talked about it several times in terms of getting rid of phobias based on Mauer's two-factor theory, which says that you acquire phobias through classical conditioning and that you maintain them through operant conditioning because you won't stay in the presence of the conditioned stimulus to find out that it won't harm you, so that you maintain them when you could extinguish them. So systematic desensitization is a procedure for that. And then the last is observational learning. And that's the basic observational learning processes. Know those. In fact, since you bothered to come today, just know those. That's what's the question. Right? Everybody up to speed. That's all there is left. Now I'm going to go back and go through the material. So if you can stay, please stay. If you can't, I totally understand that. Just leave as quiet as you can and have a great spring break. I'll give you a second to do that so that we can not get too much rustling on our video. If you got to go, you could go. I'm thinking maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes tops for the rest of this. You saw what's left. It ain't a lot. Yes, ma'am.
Would you mind the slide back up with the operant conditioning or operant extinction?
Operant extinction, yeah. Sure. That one there.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. In other words, what is true for classical conditioning is also true for operant conditioning, right? So we have to acquire the behavior, whether it's shoe tying or running from dogs, right, or going to work. And if it's not followed by, in the case of classical conditioning, if it's not followed by, right, the unconditioned stimulus, then you're going to get a weakening of that response. In operant conditioning, if it's not followed by the reinforcer that you think is coming, you'll get a weakened response. If people stop paying you, you're going to extinguish your going to work behavior, right? It's going to go away. Then one day you might find it comes right back. You go by the work, you go, oh yeah, I don't work here anymore. Not likely, but you see what's going on there. The password example is better, right? All of a sudden, out of the blue, you use an old password you haven't used in a while, and you're like, why did I do that? Spontaneous recovery of a conditioned reaction. And then stimulus generalization and stimulus discrimination are the fact that the conditioned stimulus is the most likely to produce the response, whether it's classically conditioned, like adrenaline or saliva or nausea, right? Or whether it's behavioral, going to work or tying shoes, right? Because you were told to tie shoes, for example. So if it's mom tells you to tie shoes, you might do it because you learned that's better tie your shoes. That's behavioral. That's operant condition, right? But maybe grandma says tie shoes and you're like, I don't really have to do it because she's sufficiently different from the conditioned stimulus that I don't have to do the behavior. But then grandma might, you see what I'm saying, might tie enough and now you learn to do that. Now anybody can tell you to tie your shoe and you'll tie your shoe as a kid, right? So that's the idea. The further away you get from the conditioned stimulus, the less likely you are to do the response because there's not a contingency anymore, right? There's not a contiguity. They're not associated with previous reinforcement or previous unconditioned stimuli being applied, so it goes away. Good? Or doesn't, or in discrimination doesn't present itself. All right. Thank y'all for staying. I appreciate that. I know that's hard on people, and I don't ever intend to do this, but we're so far behind with the 3 days missed that I've probably been slower than I need to be in some ways. So I'll take some blame there too. But 3 closures didn't help. Fixed ratio is where we're at. Fixed ratio, now we're looking fixed. It's the same. Ratio, now it's the number of behaviors. The number of behaviors versus the time period in which the behaviors occur. That is going to be interval. Right? Everybody knows what interval means, right? It's between. So the interval in time is what a fixed interval will be. A fixed ratio means that a certain number of non-reinforced responses occurs before the reinforced response will occur. And you can schedule this out any way you want. The higher the reinforcer value, the longer the pause. So for FR 100, that just means fixed ratio 100. That means you have to do 100 behaviors before you get a reinforcer. Now, in animal models, that's really easy to show. Skinner would very quickly show that you could take a rat or a pigeon, and it learns to peck a disc if it's a pigeon, or it learns to press the lever if it's a rat, because it gives a pellet of food. Right? Doing the behavior brings a pleasurable consequence. Well, then he just simply doesn't get food the first peck. It takes 5 pecks or 5 presses. Then you get food. Right? And you can get this up to thousands. Right? You can put it on a FR 1000 scale, and the rat will push the lever 1,000 times because that's when the reinforcer gets delivered. But that has to be shaped. Rat's not going to randomly push a bar, 1,000 times to get food. It has to be shaped through the behavior. Well, we do stuff like that when we do piecework, right? Let's say I'm sewing soccer balls, right? And if I get hardly any money at all, as is often the case, to sew a soccer ball, right? If I get 50 cents, that might be pretty good. It takes me an hour to sew one. What am I going to do when I'm done? If I'm in a depressed economy where 50 cents is big money, I'm going to get right to the next soccer ball. But you know what? I might go in between because I got my 50 cents banked. But what if I only get paid for every 10 that I produce? All right, then I'm going to keep going. If I stop, it'll be random, brief breaks. And when I get to 10, I'm going to go, whew. All right, there's my $5. Maybe, but if I didn't get to 10, I wouldn't get paid. So it turns out there's some human analogs to these very academic examples otherwise. Variable ratio I've got asterisk because it is also the most powerful of the 4 types. Variable ratio, now you're going to get reinforcement only if you do the behavior, just like fixed. But I don't know which behavior will bring the reinforcer. Could be the next one, the 50th one, the 73rd one, the 2010th one. It's random. That's why it's called variable. It's still ratio because it's still about the number of behaviors occurring. Right? So if I look at this, what I see is a highest rate of responding, and I get rid of the post-reinforcement pause. That little pause after the reinforcement is either physically delivered or mentally scored as having been achieved. Most powerful schedule, VR 1000, for example. That means on average, every 1,000th response will be rewarded. You put in a quarter, you pull the lever, you're not going to get the jackpot this time, or will you? You might. But you might pull that lever 10,000 times and never get it. But if it was a VR 1000 schedule, what that means is that on average it will pay off every 1,000th response. It still might be the 3rd or the 5th or the 50th or 100th or 10,000th, but on average it'll be every 1,000 responses. This can be addictive. And it can be made use of. Y'all know the lottery, right? And y'all know scratch-off tickets. That's exactly how scratch-off tickets work. They don't want you to wait 1,000 times to win something, right? Because guess what you would do? You'd quit. It would extinguish, right? So about what? Every 5th to 10th time you'll win what? $5, $1, $2. Which is interesting because what do you do with it? You have to go back to the point of sale to cash it in, and most people don't get the money. They go, give me 3 more tickets until they have no winning ticket. So they still keep your money. Isn't that fascinating? And then randomly somebody's going to win a bigger one. And guess what they do when somebody wins the bigger one? They put their poster at the location they win at to show that somebody here won the big one, which keeps people enticed, right? Because you can't win if you don't play. But if you play, you're actually not likely to win. You're very likely to win $1 to $5 within 5 to 10 cards. But it's variable. It's a ratio because you have to buy the ticket and scratch it, right? The behavior has to occur, but you don't know which behavior is going to be reinforced, which number of behaviors has to be engaged in to get reinforced. Now we're going to flip. We still got fixed. We still have variable. Now we're talking about interval. Not the number of times that you perform the behavior. The time span in which the behavior occurs. Here, we've got a scalloped effect on a graph. The rate of responding increases gradually through the interval up until the reinforcement, and then you get a reinforcement pause. Response pause. The higher the reinforcer value, the longer the pause. That's like most paydays and test days, right? You don't get paid every time you do some work. For most time, you get paid once a week or once every 2 weeks, or in our case, once a month. Well, if checks are handed out, guess what happens to attendance closer to payday? It goes up. Guess what happens after payday? Absenteeism. People give themselves a little post-reinforcement pause. They might be more likely to be absent that day. But if the boss is around on paydays, then you're going to see a lot more work behaviors around those days. But it doesn't really matter how many work behaviors you engage in. As long as you engage in enough not to get fired, then every fixed pay period, you'll get reinforced with your check. You see what I'm saying? So it's the interval. It's that you came to work during the interval that you get paid. Right, if you didn't come to work at all during the interval, you wouldn't get paid for the interval unless you're on salary. And if you did enough of that, they'd fire you. Right? So it's about doing the behavior, but doing the behavior in a certain time frame. Mail. I like this example. When I lived in Christiansburg, the mail came in the morning. I moved to Memphis. So the first thing I did the morning after I moved in was what? I checked the mailbox, right? Because I'd been reinforced to check the mailbox in the morning. No mail. Later, no mail. Later, no mail. I can do the checking behavior as many times as I want, but it'll only be reinforced what? Once during that 24-hour period. That's when the mail comes. It turned out that mail didn't come until after 5 p.m. every day. So I changed my behavior. Checking in the morning got extinguished. Checking in the evening got reinforced. But I only checked once at that point because I learned when the reinforcement period would end. It was a fixed interval. Variable interval is now a period of time elapsing, but you don't know how long. It's a random amount of time passes, but you have to do the behavior in that interval to get the reinforcement. So after a certain amount of time has passed, you do a behavior and you see if it's reinforced. If not, you might let various lengths of time go by before you try again. But it's about the length of time. So checking your email. Right? Every time you check your email, is there an email to be seen? It's kind of random. It's about the amount of time that goes by. It might be 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 hours, whatever, before somebody sends you your next email. But it doesn't really matter. Right? You could check 50 times. It's not going to make email come, right? Checking your notifications on social sites like, remember Facebook? Way back in the day, people used Facebook. And you see what? Notification. Well, you can check Facebook all day, but it doesn't make a notification happen. But what's reinforcing? Why are you checking it? To see if there's been some interaction, right? See if somebody's messaged you. See if somebody's put something on your wall. See if they've liked something you posted, right? That's the reinforcer that keeps you checking. But most people don't check all day. They check every now and then. Different people check at different rates because different people are reinforced differentially. And nobody likes getting that spam email that isn't anything worth reading, and nobody likes getting that notification, being invited to that event. Oh, Chris Dool's playing that damn band again. I wish he would quit inviting me to them damn events. I don't want to go. Right? Because that's not reinforcing. You checked. Oh, it's not what I wanted. So it was a little punishing. Now, again, making the point here, concurrent schedules of reinforcement. You're on multiple schedules for multiple aspects of your life. All kinds of complex things go on in our lives. We got work schedules, we got family schedules, we got significant other schedules, we got friendship schedules, we got school schedules, we might have looking after kids schedules, we might have hobby schedules, we have sleep schedules, we have eating schedules. All of those things are schedules of reinforcement that impinge on our lives. That's why when I see people not showing up, I don't go, well, they are this kind of person. I say, probably they're getting greater reinforcement doing something else right now. That's what's controlling their behavior. More than them controlling it, it's more like, what do they want? Well, if their friend says, can we go out today? And they say, this is the only day we can go out. They might go to that instead of class if that was more powerful to them, right? But if they say, no, I really want an A in this class. I'd like to go out and hang out with you today, but I have to go to class. Then the class is more reinforcing. Right? So the one that's the most powerful reinforcer typically wins. But we can learn to inhibit that. That's what going long term, right? Not instant gratification, but suppressing instant gratification for long-term gratification is what we're talking about. If you understand these, it's helpful. Here's just the schedules of reinforcement. You can Google this probably. On a fixed ratio schedule, I make 5 pieces of, or let's say I make 10 pieces and I get paid, or I know that I've banked my money. Better make the next 10. Better make the next 10. That little mark is your post-reinforcement pause. Gambling, pull the lever, scratch the ticket. Man, my arm's sore. Better take a break, but it doesn't have anything to do with being reinforced, right? When am I going to take the break? Here and here. Here, I'm just doing the behavior. It's happening high rates, steady rates. I get reinforced, what happens? I'm on a streak. I better keep doing it, so I do it more, right? So I don't take a break with the variable ratio. And it's harder to extinguish this because it's being variable. I don't know when it's not in effect anymore. I don't know when the machine will be out of quarters, for example. I don't know when they get a bad batch or what have you. I don't know when to stop doing the behavior because I don't know when the next reinforcement will come. This scalloped one is your fixed interval. I like studying before a test. Y'all go to study the first day of a semester? Now, close to the test get, what happened? Studying behavior increases. And there you're reinforced, either because you got the grade you want or because the pressure's off. And sometimes both, right? So what happens? Everybody finish the test and run right back to studying? No, it take a long post-reinforcement pause, hang out for a few days, and then closer to the next test, they start studying more. And what you get is eventually you have a final test, right? Y'all take the last test in the class, and then you go study that more and more and more. It's done, right? You put it away forever. So the behavior for that particular class stops. If you make a career out of it, of course, what do? Enroll in more courses of a similar nature, and you repeat the process, and you learn more about those things. So that is the essence of this. Now, here we're talking about helping people with phobias. It fits into the learning chapter and into the abnormal treatment section that we'll talk about at the end of the class. You don't need to know Mauer's two-factor theory for your test, but this is essentially what it is, right? When the dog bites me, that's a classical conditioning effect, right? Dog was previously neutral. It bites me. Now the next time I see a dog, I feel a rush of what I might call fear, but it's really adrenaline, right? Because I can interpret it as exciting. If I was on a roller coaster and felt the same way, I go, well, that's exciting. But in the context of the dog having bitten me, I interpret that as aversive. That's classically conditioned. But if the dog never bit me again and I stayed, then seeing the dog eventually would not cause that reaction. It would extinguish. But here's the trick with phobias. If you're really frightened by something, what happens? Do you stay until the fear goes away? You leave, which is negatively reinforced, meaning you're more likely to leave and more likely to avoid the situations that are similar to that in the future, meaning that you never extinguish the anxiety. So systematic desensitization, we teach you how to relax because you can't be deeply relaxed and anxious at the same time, right? And you can do this with your imagination or do it in real life. We will now expose you to those things that you fear, conditioned stimuli, things that were previously neutral, without having the unconditioned stimulus hurt you, right? So you got to make sure people are really safe. But then if you can keep them in the situation and keep them calm, eventually they unlearn the anxiety reaction. And I've done that in 2 or 3 days. I've even done that in less than 30 minutes. Somebody I know who was very, very afraid of heights, but we were at a lighthouse, wanted to go up to the top of the lighthouse, but was not about to do that. What do? Systematically, in vivo. Do the breathing thing. Got up about 10 feet on that stairwell, right, that just spirals around nothing if you look down, and it was too much, so we went back down, then went a little bit higher, stop, breathe, extinguish the anxiety response, a little higher. Within about a half hour, we're at the top, and the person's outside because they were safe all along, right? The fear of heights was irrational. Everybody knows that phobias are rational by definition. That's rations up here. Rationality is in your forebrain. Your survival mechanisms are base brain operated, right? They're telling you, get out, get out, get out. It's dangerous. But in this case, it's not really dangerous. And that person was able to overcome it. Work with other people with other fears. Many times, systematic desensitization is the gradual exposure of people to the objects or situations they fear, either imaginally, by just imagining it, the situations in a systematic fashion, or in life, which is in vivo. Based on the two-factor theory, it's the process of extinguishing the classical conditioned anxiety response, which is facilitated by telling people how to avoid the avoidance response and the escape response so that they actually stay in the situations. Now, they can extinguish those reactions, but sooner or later, guess what's going to happen? Spontaneous recovery, they're going to get a little nervous in a similar situation, but if they know what's happening, that's not a big deal. They go, oh, it's coming back, but all I need to do is stay calm and not leave the situation. It'll go away quicker and stay away longer. It's pretty amazing stuff.